Hello, Daveaholics, and welcome to the first edition of the Ocho Points of Interest podcast with me, your host, Dave Speed Ocho. I'm calling you all Daveaholics because I'm assuming most of the people listening to this first podcast are going to be friends and family. If you're listening to this podcast and you have no idea who I am, welcome. As I mentioned, I am Dave Speed Ocho, and this is the first podcast that I've ever recorded. So, let's get straight to it. The first point I would like to make on this podcast is what this podcast is about. I call this Ocho Points of Interest podcast because each week I am going to be discussing 8 points which I find interesting. Some of you may find these interesting as well, some of you may not. I'm hoping to cover a variety of different topics, and hopefully there will be something for everybody, and that way I will hopefully gather more listeners, because if I talk about something that you guys are interested in, you're going to want to listen. So, that's a bit of an explanation about this podcast. Podcasting is something that I've wanted to do for a while, but it's not something that I've ever really taken the initiative to do until now, and that is because it was recently suggested to me that my friend Josh and I should co-host a wrestling podcast together. I immediately jumped at the opportunity because, as I said, podcasting is something that I've wanted to do for a while, and I figured if we were going to do that, I would do a test run and start my own podcast until Josh and I get that wrestling podcast off and running. That brings me to the second point of interest this week. Now, as I said, it was suggested to me that I do this wrestling podcast with Josh, and that is hopefully going to happen sometime around mid to late April. And I jumped at the chance because, as I said, I've wanted to do a podcast for a long time, but I also haven't watched wrestling for a long time. I don't think I've watched wrestling ever since the whole Chris Benoit murder-suicide situation happened back in around 2006, 2007, whenever it was. So I really haven't watched wrestling in the past 6, 7, 8 years, however long it's been. So obviously, if I'm going to do a wrestling podcast, I'm going to have to start to get back into wrestling. I recently started watching WWE NXT, which was suggested to me by Josh. And the first NXT show that I watched was their show last week, their 2-hour-long special. And man, what a show to watch to get back into wrestling. That was something else entirely. NXT is essentially the minor leagues for the WWE, but from what I hear from both Josh and people that I follow on Twitter who are wrestling fans, NXT is much, much better than the current product on either Raw or SmackDown. And I am really happy that I started with watching NXT because, as I said, that show was phenomenal. If you haven't watched NXT and you are a wrestling fan, you are completely missing out, and I suggest that you get into it. I don't want to ruin any results in case there are people out there that haven't seen it. I'll probably talk more about NXT maybe next week, maybe not, depends on how busy of a news week it is and what other points of interest I decide to cover next week. So those are the first 2 points of interest for me this week, a little bit about the start of this podcast, followed by what I have in store a little bit for the future. On to stories in the news this week. A Florida mother who is currently pregnant and overdue with, I believe it's her second child, Bonnie Northsea from Gainesville, Florida, made headlines this week when she posted a video of herself dancing to Michael Jackson's Thriller on YouTube. Now, she made the video because a friend of hers apparently told her that dancing would help induce pregnancy, and Bonnie, being overdue, decided to give it a shot. Now, when I first read the story, that's the only part of the story I got. And I was going to call this story out on being another lame, stupid, viral video that just took off. But then I found more out about the story thanks to dailymail.co.uk, in which they discussed the fact that it was recently discovered that Bonnie's husband has testicular cancer. So not only did she decide to do the dance routine to give it a try and see if she could induce labor, but as she said, the video has also helped her husband, and her family cope with the news of her husband's testicular cancer and give them something to be a little bit joyful at because of the silliness of the video. So I would like to send my thoughts to Bonnie and her husband, and hopefully he can recover from his cancer. And I haven't heard whether or not she's actually had her child yet, but if she hasn't, hopefully that thing will pop out soon, and hopefully he or she will be a happy and healthy baby. So good luck to you, Bonnie, and good luck to your husband with his cancer. Hopefully, as I said, hopefully it's something that can be taken care of and gotten rid of. From there, I would like to discuss the Saturday Night Live 40th anniversary special, which aired this past Sunday. I did not get a chance to see the 40th anniversary, and to be honest, I have not watched SNL in probably 4 or 5 years. Now, one thing that I heard a lot about is the fact that Eddie Murphy was at SNL, but he really didn't do anything. He was just kind of there, made an appearance, and that was about it. And a lot of people were disappointed about that. Now, for those of you that don't know, Eddie Murphy had a long-standing feud with SNL over a joke which they made about him back in the early 90s. Basically, he wasn't having as much success at the box office as he had had in the 80s, and SNL poked fun at him for it. And Eddie did not take too kindly to that, seeing as how during the 5 years that Lorne Michaels was away from the show in the early 80s, Eddie Murphy basically took that show on his back and made it a continued success and helped keep it on the air instead of having it be canceled, which it was very close to happening. So Eddie Murphy was not too happy with the joke, and he held a grudge against SNL for a long time. He was, I believe, the only former SNL alumni who was still alive at the time of the 25th anniversary back in 1999 who didn't actually attend. So this is the first time he stepped foot inside the Saturday Night Live 8H studios in 30 years. Now, my theory was that SNL just didn't write a sketch for him because they didn't know if he was going to show up or not. That was my theory. And then it turned out later this week, Norm Macdonald revealed that they had written a sketch for Eddie Murphy to appear in. They wanted Eddie Murphy to appear in the Celebrity Jeopardy sketch as Bill Cosby, but Eddie Murphy decided to turn that down because Bill Cosby, as far as I know, was a major influence for Eddie Murphy as a stand-up comedian, and Eddie Murphy really didn't want to kick the guy while he was down. I don't think Eddie condones the acts or allegations against Bill Cosby, but as somebody who Eddie no doubt looked up to as a comedian growing up, I'm sure it's a very hard situation for him to put himself into, and he just kind of wants to keep his distance from it. So the role of Bill Cosby ended up going to Kenan Thompson, and Eddie Murphy just made a quick brief appearance on the show without actually doing any sketches, which again disappointing a lot of people, but I can understand from Eddie's standpoint why he chose to do what he did by turning the role down. From there, I'd like to move on to sports for a moment. And it was announced this week that the UFC will mandate a new drug testing policy in which they will have much more out-of-competition testing for fighters. It was revealed that I believe it was about 1.7%. That number might be a little off. It was 1 point something percent of their fighters have tested positive for drugs during post-fight or what they call in-competition drug testing. Basically, testing done the day of or basically immediately after scheduled fights. Now, in addition to that 1 point something percent, I believe it was revealed that something like 26.3% of fighters failed out of competition drug tests. Now, what that means is when drug tests are held randomly in the weeks and months leading up to a fight, the number of people that test positive for drug use jumps dramatically from 1.7% roughly to 26.3%. So obviously there is an issue with fighters using drugs and PEDs specifically out of competition. So the UFC wants to broaden the out of competition testing so that they can catch more people who are using PEDs in the hopes of cleaning up the sport. And as the UFC said, this thing is probably going to get a lot worse before it gets better. The striking blow really came with Anderson Silva failing his drug test and testing positive for PEDs before and after his fight with Nick Diaz on January 31st. The UFC did state that hardening their drug testing stance is something that they've been looking at for a long time, but they've really decided to push it forward and take a leap of faith into it after that Anderson Silva test, because as Dana White said, that pretty much shocked everybody. That came out of left field, and nobody really, I don't know of anybody that suspected Anderson Silva of using PEDs. So this caught everyone by surprise, and it really helped speed up the process for the UFC to expand their drug testing. Now, Dana White had mentioned that there's a possibility that going forward they could implement a possible 4-year ban on fighters who test positive for their first time offense. Now, what wasn't mentioned during the press conference, or what may have been mentioned and maybe I just didn't catch it, was whether that 4-year ban is exclusive to those who get caught for PEDs, or if that's going to include all drugs. Specifically, my thought is marijuana, because as it stands right now, there have been a lot of fighters who have been suspended for anywhere from 9 months to a year for testing positive for marijuana. So I'm just wondering if the 4-year ban is going to specifically cover PEDs, or if that's going to include marijuana use as well. I would suspect it's just for PEDs, but as I said, I don't think that was covered at the press conference, or if it was, I missed it. I will have to go back and rewatch the press conference to find out for sure. From there, I want to move on to another big announcement from the UFC, which also happened at the PED press conference, and that is Rory MacDonald finally getting his title shot against Robbie Lawler. Now, Rory MacDonald was originally set to face Hector Lombard at UFC 186 in Montreal in April, but Lombard tested positive for PEDs out of competition, so he was pulled from the fight card. Rory was pulled from the fight card, and Rory will now face the last man to beat him, Robbie Lawler, at UFC 189 in July in Las Vegas. They last fought each other at UFC 167, and as I said, Robbie Lawler won. It was a split decision win. I rewatched the fight this past week, and it's a fight where I don't know who I would have given it to. Round 2 was very clearly, in my opinion, won by Rory McDonald, and all 3 judges scored round 2 for Rory. Round 3 was very clearly won by Robbie Lawler, and all 3 judges gave Robbie Lawler round 3, although I think if there was a couple more minutes or even a 4th round, I think Rory could have turned things around, because Robbie hit Rory with some hard shots in that 3rd round, and Rory kept on coming, kept on getting up, but Robbie definitely won that 3rd round. Now, where the fight comes into question in my mind is the 1st round. 2 out of the 3 judges gave the 1st round to Robbie Lawler. It was a very boring and slow paced 1st round, and although Robbie Lawler landed more strikes and did more damage, Rory really controlled the pace. I don't recall the last time I saw a fight where the person who controlled the pace of a round didn't actually end up doing as much damage as their opponent. Rory was very methodical in that 1st round. He took his time and was looking for shots to land against Robbie, and Robbie allowed Rory to control the pace. He didn't go after Rory the way I think Robbie normally goes after opponents. Robbie was very slow as well, and he was picking his spots. The only difference is when Robbie picked his spots, he was landing a lot more and a lot more significantly than when Rory was picking his spots. So if I was a judge, I really don't know how I would have scored the 1st round. I would have given it a 9-9 if it wasn't based on a 10-9 must system. I think I would probably have to side the way the other 2 judges sided, which was giving it to Robbie mainly because of landing more strikes and doing more damage, even though Rory really controlled the pace of that 1st round. I'm looking forward to this fight. As I said, I think the first fight was close and it really could have gone either way. I think Rory has become a little bit better since that loss to Robbie, although Robbie has been on a tear lately as well. He was down and out, and he came back in 2013, started his road back to contention, and eventually not regained, but won the UFC welterweight championship for the first time back in December against Johnny Hendricks. Sticking with fight news, it was announced earlier today being Friday, February the 20th, it was announced earlier today that the Manny Pacquiao-Floyd Mayweather fight has finally been agreed to and signed, and it's scheduled to take place May 2nd. Now, this is a fight that a lot of people have been anticipating for many years now, and it's just been delayed and delayed and delayed. A lot of people accusing Floyd Mayweather of backing out multiple times. It looks like, unless there's some unforeseen circumstance, it looks like it's finally going to happen. The fight's finally going to take place, and a lot of people are looking forward to it. However, there's also a lot of people that are saying that this is happening too late. Both guys are past their prime. This fight doesn't matter anymore. It should have happened like 3, 4, 5 years ago. But here's the bottom line. Those people saying that, they're still going to watch this fight. People that don't watch boxing are still going to watch this fight. This fight, in my belief, is going to be one of the most watched boxing matches in recent memory. Bars are going to be sold out. This thing is going to be huge. People want to see this fight. It's going to do huge numbers. I'm hoping that the match can live up to the expectations that people have for it, and I'm also hoping that nothing happens to once again cancel or delay the fight. My final point of interest this week is in regards to the Oscars. The Oscars take place this Sunday, and I really haven't seen most of the movies that are nominated this year. This is the first year in a long time where I really haven't been paying much attention to the movies that have been out. However, I am still going to go ahead and make my Oscar picks. I'm only going to pick from a couple of categories. I am going to pick from animated feature, supporting actor, supporting actress, best actor, best actress, and best picture. So for animated feature, we have Big Hero 6, The Box Trolls, How to Train Your Dragon 2, Song of the Sea, and The Tale of Princess Kaguya. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, a lot of people are disappointed that the Lego Movie did not make it into the cut of the final 5 for animated feature film. I haven't seen Lego Movie, but by all accounts, it was the best animated picture of last year. So many people I know that saw it say it was definitely the best animated feature film. As I said, I haven't seen any of these movies, so I can't speak to whether the Lego Movie was that good or not, or if it was snubbed, or if it deserved to be there. However, of the 5 that are nominated, my pick is probably going to be for Big Hero 6. It's a Disney movie, so I definitely anticipate Disney taking home some hardware. The upset might go to The Tale of Princess Kaguya, but I really don't see The Box Trolls, How to Train Your Dragon 2, or Song of the Sea really making a push for it. I think it's going to come down to Big Hero 6 or The Tale of Princess Kaguya. I'm going to pick Big Hero 6 as the winner. Moving on to Best Supporting Actress, we've got Patricia Arquette, Laura Dern, Keira Knightley, Meryl Streep, and Emma Stone. In any other year, I think Meryl Streep would get this because it's Meryl Streep, but she is nominated this year for Into the Woods, which was a musical that was really loved or really hated by most people. There was no in-betweens, and I really just don't think Meryl Streep is going to win for a musical. I think it's going to go to Laura Dern for The Wild. I think Laura Dern has been long deserving of an Academy Award. I think she's finally going to get her award this year. The upset might go to Keira Knightley. I think Emma Stone, I would love to see Emma Stone win. I just don't see it happening. Once again, I am going to go with Laura Dern on this one. For Best Supporting Actor, we've got Robert Duvall, Ethan Hawke, Edward Norton, Mark Ruffalo, and J.K. Simmons. And I think hands down J.K. Simmons is going to win this. He's been winning every possible award for Best Supporting Actor the past couple of months for his role in Whiplash, and I think it's going to culminate in winning the Oscar. So J.K. Simmons is my hands down pick for Best Supporting Actor. Actress in a leading role, we've got Marion Cotillard, whose name I can never pronounce correctly, Felicity Jones, Julianne Moore, Rosamund Pike, and Reese Witherspoon. Again, I have not seen any of the movies that these actresses have been nominated for, but I've been hearing very good things about The Wild. I am going to go out on a limb and say Reese Witherspoon wins this, although Julianne Moore for Still Alice might pull off the upset and take out Reese Witherspoon. For Best Leading Actor, we've got Steve Carell, Bradley Cooper, Benedict Cumberbatch, Eddie Redmayne, and Michael Keaton. I really think this award is going to come down to Bradley Cooper for American Sniper or Benedict Cumberbatch for The Imitation Game. I've seen The Imitation Game. It was really, really well done. I cannot recommend that movie enough. It is a period piece. It takes place during World War II, and if there's anything that the Oscars love, it's period pieces. So it's either going to come down to American Patriotism with Bradley Cooper or the period piece with Benedict Cumberbatch. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Benedict Cumberbatch wins this for The Imitation Game. Now, for Best Picture, the nominees are American Sniper, Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Innocence, Birdman or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance, Boyhood, The Grand Budapest Hotel, The Imitation Game, Selma, The Theory of Everything, and Whiplash. Now, Grand Budapest Hotel has won some awards. I believe they won the Golden Globe for Best Picture, so they're definitely one of the favorites to win the Oscar. I would also include The Imitation Game in there, and American Sniper. I think those are going to be your top three. American Sniper, I think, is going to win it. Although I don't think Bradley Cooper is going to win Best Actor, I do think American Sniper is going to end up winning the Academy Award for Best Picture. Although I would not be surprised if it went to the Grand Budapest Hotel. So that's going to wrap it up for this week. If you have any thoughts or comments on this show, you can feel free to contact me at Ocho Points Podcast at gmail.com. That's OCHOPOINTS at gmail.com. I'm not sure where I will be hosting this podcast, but if you just listen to it, it means I found somewhere to put it up. And I will try to put out another one next week. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.